I can just remember screaming, and I just was thinking to myself, I just want my mom. I don't want to be alone in here. I just want my mom. I basically communicating to our child that I can't handle you right now. I can't be near you right now when you're acting this way. Timeout on the outside can look really effective. My biggest fear with timeout is that it's just a band-aid or a temporary fix. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Bless Our Littles podcast. This is a show where I help parents to become the parents that they were made to be. It's my mission to give you the tools on how to raise children with love, connection, and empathy. So let's get into today's episode. So this week on the podcast, we are going to be talking about a question that I received from a client in regards to timeout. She was really curious as to why I don't put my own children in timeout and why I do not think it's an effective form of punishment or discipline. And it really got me thinking. Like, it really had me solidifying what I know and what I believe about timeouts and what they do. And so I thought it would be a really good episode for you to listen to give you a little bit more to think about. Like, you need more to think about, but just to give your mind, I guess, a little bit more information to really help you decide, is this a tool that you want to continue using with your children? So I want you to know that I think timeout in what it should do would be really helpful, right? Like, I think that we think of timeout as this place where our kids can go and think about what they've done. At least that's how I've heard timeout described from parents. And I don't believe that kids do that when they're in timeout. I believe that there is a much deeper issue going on when we put them into timeout. So like I said, we'll get into all of it, but I just wanted to kind of put that out there before we get into all the content. And, I'm assuming that you've clicked on this episode because you either are putting your child in timeout and you're like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. Maybe you feel mom guilt about it. Or maybe you just like, oh, I didn't even realize that timeout could be something that's not a great form of punishment. Like, what else can I do? So this episode is really just for that. So I'm going to keep looking at my notes here as always, because if not, I'm going to get off topic and you guys will be here for 2 hours listening to a podcast episode about timeout. But the first thing that I want you to know is that timeout on the outside can look really effective. We see our child go into timeout. They're probably, screaming, kicking, yelling, crying, whining, whatever, and we don't have to be in the room. And when they've calmed down, which if you're on YouTube, you can see I'm doing air quotes, because they've stopped the behavior. And it looks like maybe they don't ever repeat that behavior again. So say you put them in timeout for hitting and they repeat that behavior, they don't repeat that behavior again after you put them in timeout. It can look like, oh yeah, that worked. My child got the cue that hitting is not something we do. And so you get a punishment for that. And my fear is that, when that stops working or it doesn't work, because obviously timeout is not something that works for every child. Like, then what do you do, right? Like, that's what really my client was coming up against. Her child kept hitting and she kept putting him in timeout, and then he'd stop the behavior for a little bit and then it would pick right back up again. And I feel like this is something that I see in a lot of parent-child relationships is, they see a behavior and it stops, so they think it's working, and then either that behavior picks up again later or a new behavior comes out. And so it can feel like, oh my gosh, like this is working and now it's not. So maybe you're here for that too. Maybe you're like, it was working and now it's not, and what is going on? And so, I know as a parent, like, it can feel like timeout is the only thing that's going to get your child to listen, right? To get them to do what you're asking. But that's kind of my fear, is like, as a parent, are you expecting your child to obey and respect, again, air quotes here, every need that you are asking for, or every demand that you're telling them that they need to do? And when they aren't doing it, you are, expecting them to, you're basically expecting them to be an adult and just say, okay, yes, I will go clean my room right now. And when they cannot do that, you are punishing them for whatever, reaction they are having to that no. So my biggest fear with timeout is that it's just a Band-Aid or a temporary fix, which is basically what I was just saying, that, in the future, you're going to start seeing other behaviors. It's really just a replacement. I think I've talked about this in past videos where it's like you maybe put your child in timeout for hitting. So you yell, or you put them in timeout, or, you spank them or whatever. And then that behavior stops. So it looks like it worked. But then another behavior is just going to come in and replace the behavior they just did, because they have an unmet need. I did a whole YouTube video on how to know what your child is needing. They're not naughty, they're needing something. And so I will make sure to link that below. And I will also, if you're on YouTube, there'll be a little card above so you can go check that video out. But there's always a need that is going on. And that's why, a child is having a response. So I want you for a second to go back to your childhood. I'm going to assume that you used timeout because you went in timeout as a child. So if you were a timeout kid, I want you to go back to that experience. I want you to picture that moment your parent was punishing you for whatever you had done. And I want you to picture yourself in your room, on the stair, on the chair, on the rug, wherever your timeout spot was. I want you to go through, and I want you to just share you can either share in the comments below, or you can, think about it and maybe share with a friend or something. What was going on for you in that moment? What were you thinking to yourself? Because I'm going to almost bet 100% of the time you were not thinking about your actions and what you could have done differently. You didn't know to do that. For me, when I went to my room, or I was sat on the stair, that was the two, if my parents were going to punish me, that's how they were going to punish me. I can just remember screaming, and I just was thinking to myself, I just want my mom. I don't want to be alone in here. I just want my mom. I just want to just go back to my mom, it was never like, my thought was never going to what I had done. I didn't care about what I had done. I had cared about the fact that I wasn't, my bedroom was upstairs, so I wasn't downstairs with my mom. That was really upsetting for me. So like I said earlier, I think that parents are trying to accomplish, like, you need to think about what you've done, but there is no thinking for a child. They, especially under the age of 7, they have no ability to self-regulate. It may look like it on the outside, but then they are just internalizing it, which really scares me, because that's where a child is feeling like they can't get out what is going on for them. And, as I used my Band-Aid analogy earlier, that Band-Aid, if you leave that Band-Aid on for too long, it's going to get infected. And when it gets infected and you have to rip off the Band-Aid now, you now have a whole slew of issues that you're going to have to deal with that wound. And that's how I like to think of any form really of punishment, but in this case of timeout. So if timeout is not a place that our child is thinking about their actions, what is it? It's basically communicating to our child that I can't handle you right now. I can't be near you right now when you're acting this way. So I am going to disconnect myself from you and go downstairs, cool off, go do what I need to do to get myself right. And the truth is that we are adults that should know how to self-regulate. Said it. Sometimes when I say these things, I'm like, oh boy, somebody's gonna be real upset with me for this, but it's true. Like, we were not given the tools, we were not taught how to self-regulate ourselves. So when we are having these feelings of rage and anger and we can't control them, so then we go put our child in their room, this is not our child's fault. This is not our child's fault that we're yelling or we're feeling rage or anger. This is our fault. We, don't have the tools to be able to, like I said, self-regulate and help ourselves come down. When we think of our thermometer, we have to come down the thermometer to be able to actually think. And our child, when they're in timeout, yelling, screaming, they are way out over here. They, as I say, they're offline. We need to bring them back down to calm to be able to bring them online. And with timeout, I mean, it may look like your child is calm, but most of the time they don't want to talk after timeout. And that's because they're just doing what you just modeled to them. You modeled to them, when things get really hard and I don't know what to do with my emotions, I don't want anything to do with you. And so now that's just translating, now your child doesn't want to talk to you. Well, yeah, they don't want to talk to you because you just modeled that's what you do when you're feeling these big, big feelings. So I want us to remember that a lot of children won't repeat a behavior out of fear. It's not because they've actually learned a lesson, which for me is like, so you're telling me that if I yell at my child or I put them in timeout, that they haven't learned anything? So all of this wasted frustration and anger and yelling and just all of this was for nothing? Yes, it probably was for nothing, because they're just going to do it out of fear again and again and again. So instead of repeating that behavior, our kids are going to just, like I said, replace it with a different behavior, which to me, it doesn't accomplish anything. Now, instead of hitting, we're going to be dealing with kicking. And if we're not dealing with kicking anymore, we're going to be into lying. And really, that is not what we are trying to accomplish. We are trying to be the model for our kids, be that healthy, safe space where they can grow and learn and make mistakes. They can, yell, hit, scream, backtalk, all of the things under our loving care. And we get to redirect them and show them with empathy and compassion how they can show up. And most of what we're doing has nothing to do with the words that we say, and it has everything to do with our actions. And so I want you to keep that in mind when you're thinking about doing the whole timeout thing. So I know what you're thinking. Okay, so if timeout is not the answer, then what is? And basically, I think that the biggest thing, if you take anything away from this video, is that we as parents need to know how to regulate ourselves. I just did a podcast about basically my beginner's guide to regulating yourself and the things that I would do if I didn't know anything about how to regulate myself. It is crucial that we know how to bring our bodies back down to earth, right? To ground ourselves so that we can show up and then teach our children through that, because they need our calm. Like I've said over and over again, children up until the age of 7 need 100% co-regulation. And then it just very slowly starts to go down from there. Even us adults who know how to regulate ourselves fairly well, we still need, I believe it's like 20% co-regulation. I may have gotten that wrong. If I did, I'll put a little thing here. But we still need some portion of regulation. And for me, that's just showing that we need each other and we need each other to show up for one another. That's how we're going to be able to handle situations in a way that we're proud of, that is going to teach our children how to react and how to respond. And the truth is this might be really foreign for you because you were not given these tools as a child. You were never taught how to regulate yourself, but you get to learn alongside your child. And there is going to be, there's going to be many setbacks. There's going to be all over the place emotions and feelings and responses. But you get to teach your child through that. You get to have an explosion and then come to your child and say, hey, I didn't want to act that way. I did because I was really, really, really frustrated and I didn't know how to calm myself down. But looking back, I think I could have taken a few deep breaths and I could have paused and then I could have responded. So I'm sorry. And they're going to mess up too. You know, their whole life, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to yell or scream or whatever, make a mistake. And we want to also show them how to recover from that, how to heal from that. I think that is really key. The second thing that I think we need to do as parents is lay down that authoritative parenting mindset. Throw it out the window. I want to replace this with truly helping our child to grow and learn together. And so when I think of the authoritative kind of parent, I think of like this parent that's like over top, like of the child, like yelling down, like you should not, you know, like that's obviously very extreme, but that's how I think of it. And I want to be like in collaboration with my child. So that means I'm getting down on their level. I'm talking with them. I'm asking them questions. I'm getting curious about what they were feeling in that moment, because what they are going through matters just as much as what I'm going through. And that is a key difference between an authoritative parent and a parent who wants to work with their child. Now, I don't want you to get this confused with permissive parenting, because I know that that's going to come up. Oh, well, this sounds like permissive parenting. It's not, because we want to calm our child. Well, first we want to calm ourselves down, but then we want to calm our child down. And then we do want to set a boundary and we want to have a true teaching moment. It's not like the behavior gets forgotten about or, you know, we're distracting our child from it. No, like, and there may be a consequence, like a consequence, a very natural consequence could be, hey, you know, you really wanted to ride your bike and then you started yelling and screaming. So for me, being your mom, I got to keep you safe. So I'm going to have to put the bike up high until you can put your helmet on. And once you put your helmet on, then I can take down the bike. It's not saying you're not getting the bike for the whole week. Like, none of that. It's putting a literal natural consequence to what has happened. So the last thing that we need to do, which I actually already touched on, but we need to help our child find calm before we can even think about setting a boundary, talking about the natural consequences. We need to be able to get them to this state where they can listen, because I want you to think of yourself when you are really angry and really frustrated. Maybe it's with your spouse. You can't hear anything. It's like there's these blockers up. And this is what's happening for your child, no matter what age they are, but especially in those toddler years. They cannot hear you. They literally cannot hear what you're saying. So yeah, it may look like playing magnet tiles, because you know that that helps to calm them down, and then having the conversation. They're not like a dog where they've forgotten about the situation that's happened. They remember. They do. Even my 18-month-old, we do this with her, and we actually bring her to the window. That is one of her calming tools, and it just brings her down from feeling crazy. And after a minute or two of her body calming down, we talk about what happened. You know, she's not really able to say what's going on and what she's thinking, but we still give her that opportunity, which honestly is really growing her. Like, it's amazing to see the difference in how she is handling situations already at 18 months. So much different than my 3-year-old did at that age. We dealt with way more tantrums, and I really, my 18-month-old like doesn't have tantrums like ever. And I just feel like it's because she is feeling heard. She's feeling seen. She's feeling like I can come down. I can calm down. I'm safe. And that is ultimately our goal. Our children are going to learn the most in safety. So I hope that this episode was helpful. I understand that it may be a little controversial. There may be some people that totally don't agree, and that is okay. I want you to know that even if you don't agree with how much punishment is okay or not okay and what degree and whatever, you are just doing the best you can for your child. It is up to us as the parent to know how to effectively raise our children. And so please, please, please don't ever take anything I'm saying as this is the way you have to do it. I completely understand that there is a bit of a bit of leeway that can happen there, where you are still maybe in fight or flight yourself. You haven't learned how to regulate yourself. And so this doesn't make sense. It's like, I don't get it. And that is okay. I completely understand. I feel like this concept is something that you have to be ready for, and maybe your body's just not ready to hear it yet, and that is okay. So I hope that this was helpful. If you have any questions, you can either comment below if you're on YouTube, or you can send me an email, alexis@blessourlittles.com. I love reading these. I email almost everybody back, unless you get into my junk folder by accident, but I try to message everybody back. And if there is a question that I feel would be super helpful for the podcast, like I feel like other people would benefit from, I will also air it on here. Anyhow, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next episode.